Get ready for the explosive third installment of the Corazón del Crimen series. In Badge and Betrayal, we enter the corrupt world of the police force in New York City, where the line between right and wrong is blurred and loyalty is everything. Chief of Police Pete Machete is caught in the middle of a war between rival drug cartels, but when one of his own is killed, he must navigate a dangerous path of revenge and deceit to bring justice to those responsible. As the tension rises and alliances shift, our beloved characters from previous installments must also face their own demons and make choices that will forever change their lives. With the pulse-pounding energy of hip-hop music driving the action, Badge and Betrayal is a thrilling ride through the heart of the criminal underworld, where no one is safe and betrayal is always lurking around the corner. Written by Troy Bello the Prophet. Chapter 1. Pete Machete, Chief of Police. Pete Machete cruised through the streets of New York City in his Mach 1, windows down, blasting NORE's I Love My Life. The chorus went, I love my life, sold drugs my life, live my whole life, I sacrifice. This game we play, I live and pray that people say I love my life. As he made his rounds, different thugs would either salute him or retreat into alleys, fear in their eyes. Others showed him respect. He sang along to the music, I love my life, sold drugs my life, live my whole life, I sacrifice. This game we play, I live and pray that people say I love my life. Pete thought back to when his grandfather took away the family name and gave him the name Machete. He was hurt at first because he was a gangster at heart and never wanted to be a police officer. But he was the smartest of his siblings and the only one capable of achieving a goal, something his grandfather knew from the day he was born. Years later, Pete rode through the city with a gang bigger than any other gang in New York City, the New York Police Department. A third of the officers worked for him. A third of them would die for Officer Machete, and a third of them knew about his criminal activities. It was a well-organized game, licensed to carry guns, licensed to kill their ops. Pete pulled up to a couple of working girls on the street, talking to them for a second before pulling off. He got information from some crackheads, dropped off a package in the hood, and took some drugs from drug dealers he arrested the night before to give to his guys. I love my life, sold drugs my life, risk. My whole life, I sacrifice. This game we play, I live and pray that people say, I love my life. The music continued to play as Pete drove through the city. I love my life. As the sun began to set, General Roberti and Chief Pete Machete sat at a table in the upscale Italian restaurant, Il Fiore, in the heart of Manhattan. They were surrounded by opulence, the clinking of fine crystal, and the aromas of mouth-watering dishes. General Roberti was a powerful man, a leader of a small country in Central America, while Chief Pete Machete was the head of the police force in one of New York City's toughest precincts. Both men were used to getting what they wanted, no matter the cost. They had just finished discussing a plan to take down two notorious gangsters when their meal arrived. The general's mood was surprisingly good, and he was pleased with himself for his proposed partnership with Chief Machete. They clinked their glasses together in a toast and began to enjoy their food. However, their good mood was quickly interrupted when their server, a young woman named Juliet, accidentally spilled wine on the general's expensive suit. He was outraged and began to reprimand her, but Chief Machete intervened and calmed him down. Juliet quickly apologized and offered to clean the general's suit. She walked away from the table, and within their privacy, Chief Machete made a phone call to one of his officers, instructing him to pull over a woman by the name of Juliet. He described her as a black American woman with a curvy figure. As the two men chuckled and returned to their meal, the general revealed his true intentions to Chief Machete. He was staking his claim on the city and wanted to take down two major gangsters, Sonia Escobar and Carlito Nene. He offered his allegiance to Chief Machete, calling them partners in crime. Chief Machete agreed without agreeing, promising to keep in contact. He soon excused himself, receiving a call that some of the competition was making their move, providing the perfect opportunity to take them down. The scene ended with Juliet returning to the table to refresh the general's drink. He was now courteous and even funny, as if nothing had ever happened. Juliet felt relieved, but it was only because the general knew that she would be pulled over and detained later. My words are a reminder of the power that corrupt leaders hold, whether they run a country or a police force. As the meal came to a close, I can only hope you're left to ponder the consequences of the General and Chief Machete's sinister plans and the fate of those caught in the crossfire. Chapter 2. The Raid Chief. Pete drove his 2004 Mach 1 Mustang like a man possessed. He peeled out of the parking lot, leaving behind a trail of burnt rubber. He had received a call from his elite force, the Legion of Doom, that they had spotted the big fish they had been waiting for. The money and the drugs were in a house, and they were ready to strike. When Pete arrived at the scene, he found 7 cop cars and 12 officers, 10 men and 2 women, all wearing black uniforms and carrying heavy artillery. They greeted him with a salute and a nod. Pete knew that he could count on these guys. They were the best of the best, and the worst of the worst. They had a reputation that preceded them, and they had earned it. "Chief, we're ready to move in," said one of the officers. "Good," said Pete. "What's the count looking like?" "We're estimating over $1 million and 10 keys of heroin," said the officer. "The big man won't be here till Wednesday, but we can't let this opportunity slip away." "Agreed," said Pete. "Let's do this." Pete put on his bulletproof vest and pulled out 2 Desert Eagles from his holsters. The team followed him like a pack of wolves following their alpha. They walked towards the house, guns blazing. The crew lit the house on fire, and shots started to ring out. Pete kicked the door down with his Spartan pick and rushed in like a ninja. He turned both sides and started lighting up the drug dealers that were ducking from the fire. Smoke bombs and flash bombs exploded on both sides of him, but he didn't flinch. He was in his element, and nothing could stop him. Someone rushed behind him, but he sensed it before he saw it. He elbowed the attacker, disarming him and taking him to the floor. The man begged for his life, but Pete shot him without hesitation. He could have arrested him, but he was in no mood for mercy. He was playing his own game, and he was winning. As the smoke cleared and the moans of the wounded filled the air, Pete's team continued to kill all the survivors that were in the house. They quickly found the drugs and the money, and backup was called. They had taken down another drug operation, and Pete would probably get a medal for this one. Pete was a hero, but he was also a monster. He had crossed the line a long time ago, and there was no going back. He had become what he had sworn to destroy, but he didn't care. He had a job to do, and he was damn good at it. He was the chief of police, and he was the law. Pete leaned back in his Mustang, one foot hanging out the window as he took a long drag from his spliff. The sunset was breathtaking, and with the bottle of Ace of Spade that he took in the raid, he felt like he was on top of the world. He turned up the volume on his stereo and began rapping along with Biggie Smalls. "Kick in the door, wave in the 4-4, all I heard was Pete, don't hit me no more," he sang, feeling the beat flow through him. He continued to rap along for a few more bars, feeling alive and free. But just as he was about to take another sip of his champagne, his phone rang. He answered it and immediately heard the furious voice of Sonia Escobar on the other end. $1 million and 10 keys of heroin, Pete. Do you know what you've done?" she yelled. Pete tried to explain, but he knew it was no use. He fucked up big time. Sonia was the last person he wanted to cross, but he had done it again. After unleashing a venomous introduction, Sonia ordered him to go home, get dressed, and meet her at her mansion later that night. Pete knew he had to go, but he also knew it was going to be a long night. As he drove away, the notorious Big Song continued to play, the lyrics blasting through his speakers. As Pete steps out of the steamy shower, the marble walls glisten with condensation. His condo, situated in the luxurious Upper East Side, boasts 360-degree views of the New York skyline. The spacious living room is furnished with plush leather sofas, a 70-inch flat-screen TV, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offer panoramic views of the city. But that's not all. Pete's bathroom is a technological marvel with voice-activated lighting, heated floors, and a robotic toilet that automatically detects his presence and adjusts the settings accordingly. As he walks to his closet, his bare feet sink into the plush carpet. The closet itself is larger than most studio apartments in the city, and it's filled with designer clothes and accessories. He selects a navy blue Tom Ford suit, paired with a crisp white shirt and a gold tie from Hermes. His Italian leather shoes are from Gucci, and his watch is a limited edition Rolex encrusted with diamonds. But the real piece de resistance is his jewelry collection. Pete selects a diamond tennis bracelet, stolen from a raid in the Bronx where they shot and killed two lower-level drug dealers. He then puts on his lion diamond-encrusted ring, which he took from a high-level guy he knew, intimidating him into giving it up. Next, he puts on his gold and diamond-encrusted Cuban link chain, boasting 50 carats of diamonds. He acquired it by pulling over a group of dealers in Queens and taking it off their leader at gunpoint. As he looks in the mirror, he smirks, remembering the time he took a diamond-encrusted pinky ring from a big-time dealer in Miami after threatening to throw him off a rooftop. With over $500,000 worth of jewelry on his person, Pete feels invincible. He struts out of his bedroom, down the hall, and into the elevator, his confidence radiating off him like heat from the sun. As Pete walked out of his luxurious condo, the sound of his footsteps echoed off the marble floors. The lobby was just as lavish as his condo, with towering columns, crystal chandeliers, and ornate gold trimmings. He stepped outside, and the valet immediately handed him the keys to his black Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. The car was worth over $500,000, but to Pete, it was just another vehicle in his extensive collection. He revved the engine and peeled out of the driveway, the car's sleek design hugging the road as he drove towards Sonia's mansion. The car was equipped with all the latest technology, including a top-of-the-line sound system. He connected his phone to the car's Bluetooth and blasted Kodak Black's latest album. As he drove through the busy streets of New York City, he couldn't help but feel a sense of power and control. He had taken over the criminal underworld of the city, and he was untouchable. The lyrics of Kodak Black's music only fueled his ego further. But as he turned a corner, he saw a familiar car on the side of the road. It was Juliet's car, and she was being pulled over by a patrol car. Pete slowed down and watched from a distance as Juliet stepped out of the car, her hands up in the air. The officer was rough with her, aggressively pulling her arms behind her back and slamming her against the car. Pete giggled as he watched the scene unfold. He knew why she was being pulled over, but he couldn't risk being caught up in a public scandal. He revved the engine of his car and drove away, leaving Juliet to deal with the consequences of being on Pete's bad side. As he arrived at Sonia's mansion, he couldn't shake the image of Juliet being manhandled by the officer. He was laughing his ass off, the entire ride. But he quickly pushed those thoughts aside as he stepped out of his car and walked towards the grand entrance of the mansion. The mansion was a sprawling estate, with manicured lawns, sparkling fountains, and an impressive driveway. Pete couldn't help but be impressed by the sheer opulence of the place. He knew that Sonia was a woman of great wealth and power, but seeing her mansion up close was a whole other level of extravagant. He knocked on the door and was immediately greeted by a butler in a black tuxedo. The butler led him through the grand foyer, past the sweeping staircase and into a spacious living room. There, Sonia was waiting for him, reclining on a plush sofa with a glass of champagne in her hand. "Ah, Pedro, so good to see you," she purred, standing up to greet him. "You look very handsome today." Pete smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. She didn't kill him yet, so that was a good sign. He was now in the company of one of the most powerful women in New York City. He knew that he was in for a night of indulgence and excess, but for the moment, he was content to bask in the glow of Sonia's attention. Juliet's heart was pounding as she looked down at the lifeless body of the police officer at her feet. The gun still felt heavy in her hand, but she knew she had no other choice. The officer had been blatantly abusing his power, groping her and making fucked-up comments. When she tried to resist, he had pulled out his gun and pointed it at her. In that moment, all she could think about was survival. As the officer reached for her, she managed to grab the gun from his hand. In a frantic struggle, the gun went off, and the officer fell to the ground. Juliet was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she knew she had acted in self-defense. However, she also knew that no one would believe her. She quickly left the scene, taking the officer's gun to prevent any incriminating fingerprints. She didn't want to go home to her husband and children, fearing for their safety. Instead, she drove to the only person she trusted, her friend Steve. Steve was a white American male, always loyal and supportive of Juliet. As she arrived at his apartment, she burst through the door, tears still flowing down her face. Steve rushed to her side, wrapping her in a comforting embrace. But he could feel her trembling, and he knew something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Juliet could barely speak through her sobs. She told Steve everything, how the officer had harassed her and how she had been forced to defend herself. As she finished her story, Steve's eyes widened in shock. "Juliet, do you know who that officer was?" he asked. Juliet shook her head, still trying to catch her breath. "He was one of the infamous 13 members of the Legion of Doom, the most notorious gang, precinct in New York City," Steve said, his voice trembling. Juliet's heart sank. She knew the implications of what she had just done, but she also knew she had acted out of necessity. As she looked up at Steve, she knew she had to make a choice: keep running and hiding or face the consequences of her actions. The plot thickened, and Juliet's life would never be the same again. Presto! We return back to the chief of police and Sonia Escobar finishing off a meal and chatting. When she brings up her 10 keys of heroin and her $1 million that were stolen by him and his notorious Legion of Doom, she laughs and says she doesn't expect him to give the money back, knowing the type of character he is. Money is really no concern of hers, but the trouble it took her to get those 10 keys of pure heroin, that's another story. She doesn't want to have to do any more work than she has to do, not like she does it anyways. But the one call that she makes to one of her lieutenants to get the job done is still too much for a woman like Sonia Escobar. She'd rather not be involved, and most of the time she doesn't get involved. But when her people see the same person that they pay every week hush money to come kicking their doors and kill them, they've got a problem, and they've got to call Sonia to straighten that out. So that's what she's doing. Their friendly meeting gets serious, and she demands for him to return the keys of heroin. He agrees and makes a weak excuse so he can leave. As soon as Pete leaves the room, escorted by her butlers, we simultaneously hear both of them saying about each other that they've got to get rid of the other person. Sonia is thinking she's going to have to get rid of this pig, and he is thinking he's got to get rid of this witch. She also knows that he's not going to give back the 10 keys of heroin. So immediately she makes a phone call. I wonder who she's calling. We're back on the road with Chief of Police Pete Machete, and he's headed to the Bronx. There's only one reason he goes to the Bronx, and that's to see his good old buddy Carlito Nene. He's such a shrewd individual that while he was having dinner with Sonia Escobar, he was texting Carlito Nene, telling him he was going to come through and drop off those 10 bricks for him. As he pulls up, just like routine, we see his trunk open up, and Carlito Nene walks to the driver's side to share some words with his old friend. We see Carlito Nene's brand new prodigy, Kid, who looks a little more fierce than the last time we saw him. It looks like he's really out here with Carlito. Kid walks to the back of the trunk and grabs the bag containing the 10 keys. He immediately walks inside the gated property and through the front doors into their compound, as Carlito Nene and Chief of Police Pete Machete share some random conversation. Pete leans in and whispers to Carlito, "You know, I've been having some problems with Sonia Escobar. If you can kill her, you can keep the money for the 10 keys. It's pure heroin, so make sure you guys cut it so you don't kill off half the city." Carlito Nene is thrilled. He was going to kill her anyways, but now his old buddy Pete is offering them to keep it all just to get rid of his problem. Pete knows he can't trust anyone, but he needs to get rid of Sonia Escobar, and he knows Carlito is the man for the job. As they continue to chat, Pete can't help but feel a little uneasy. He's never done anything like this before, but he knows he has no choice. If he wants to survive in this game, he needs to make some tough decisions. The tension in the air is palpable as they part ways, each with their own thoughts about what just went down. Will Carlito Nene follow through and kill Sonia Escobar? And if he does, what will be the consequences? Chapter 3. The call chief of police, Pete Machete, was driving away from the Bronx, feeling relieved that he had dropped off the 10 keys of heroin to Carlito Nene with the offer to kill Sonia Escobar. However, his peace was short-lived as he received a call from another member of his crooked cop organization, the Legion of Doom. The news was bad. 2 of their officers had gone to collect hush money from one of Sonia Escobar's drug holes, but instead of money, they found themselves in an ambush. The officers managed to kill 2 of the attackers and escape alive, but they had come to the realization that their agreement with Sonia was officially over. She had made it clear that she wanted war, and refused to pay any more money to the police department. It all made sense now. The chief realized that one of Sonia Escobar's paid hitmen must have killed his friend and member of the Legion of Doom. Juliet was in the clear, but at the moment, she was living like she was on the run. Pete immediately lost it upon hearing the news, screaming into the phone, "Who did it? Was it a hit from Sonia?" The response was that the guys were running, and it was not clear who had done it. They were checking the cameras, and hopefully, they would figure it out soon. Pete knew that he had to act quickly. He ordered the Legion of Doom to do a thorough job and hurry it up. He also told them to inform all the other members of the Legion to be on high alert. They were not sure who was taking shots right now, and he ordered to double the police on the streets right now. "Everybody gets overtime. I want every cop in New York City on their fucking feet. They want to play with me? Nobody's moving any drugs until I find out who killed my man." As Pete hung up the phone, he knew that this was not over. He had to protect himself and everyone else in his organization. He needed to find out who was responsible for killing his friend and ensure that they paid the price. Little did Julie